Welcome to Fast Pace, the new growth, leadership and management podcast featuring Josh Phegan and Dean Mackie. We wanted to peel back the layers on what happens in the world of fast-paced real estate agencies, from new leadership models to the management challenges we all face each day. This is about a new era in the estate agency sector. Rapid changes to business models, service lines, remuneration and growth present the greatest opportunities that we've ever seen. Sit back, get inspired, grow your skills and reimagine what's possible with Fast Pace. Every Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Josh Phegan Digital. Dean, one of the great things in life is to learn about the models, and my favourite one is always the stages of business growth. If you know what stage you're at, you kind of know where you're heading to next, but also you know what to do to get back to the previous stage that you might have already been. Now, Dean, there was a book written on this called Predictable Success, a guy by the name of Les McCohen, and Les said that, ultimately you would start out in this position that ultimately there was that early stage survival. You're trying to work out how the whole thing actually worked. Once you got to that, you then kind of got to fun. Things were really fun inside of the business. You were going like there's no tomorrow. Then all of a sudden you hit whitewater, not necessarily financially, but you got so much stuff coming at you. You just don't know how to handle it all until all of a sudden you get the right people and the right systems in play and you hit that level of predictable success. But after predictable success comes the treadmill, where all of a sudden we're just going through the same actions over and over and over again. And then that then leads us into this conversation of big rut. And that then takes us to what we go to call death rattle. Now, Dean, death rattle is one of my favourite stages in business. You might have remembered Sanity Music Stores. They're no longer around. Video Easy, Blockbuster, they're also no longer around. But yet, have a look at Masters hardware stores that went from early starter to all of a sudden death rattle in under 18 months. Meanwhile, Bunnings was able to be a commercial success in Australia with a whole level of predictable success. But Dean, did you know that Bunnings actually went to the UK and failed in under 18 months because they were trying to sell outdoor barbecue equipment in an area that was practically frozen with all the snowfall? So Dean, I kind of love that because whenever I walk into a business, I think about where is this business actually at today? What are the challenges that they're naturally going to face? So then I can move to the toolkit to be able to make impact as quickly as possible. Being in a position that you work in a number of businesses inside of Di Jones, what are your thoughts about this as an idea about getting some modelling and actually understand the stages of business and what you can be doing to make those businesses incredibly successful?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. You are right. In our business, we do have a number of businesses, all the different stages of performance. As we're moving into some new areas where Di Jones has never existed before, it's all startup, right? And you got to go in there with that startup mentality. So, I guess there's probably 4 or 5 key stages of business growth. And to be honest with you, I think you do come and go from these up and down. I don't think you move through them in sequential order. Mm-hmm. And I mean that because I know that I've been in businesses as, they might be a smaller business that moves from launch into growth and it ends up sort of performing pretty well, gets to a decent level of maturity. And then all of a sudden, if you want to go to the next level and you scale it again, you're sort of back to the beginning almost, right? Mm-hmm. And that also has an impact on cash flow and profitability and other things because you have to invest ahead of the curve. So I think, just because your business might even be in death rattle or decline, if you want to call it that, it doesn't mean you can't revive it. It doesn't mean you can't pivot it. It doesn't mean you can't renew. And a lot of the businesses that do that will go to the next level, right? Or just redefine who they are and on all that sort of stuff. So I don't think that it's, and I think it's quite common because I know I've been in one business for over 15 years and it's gone through stages, and it's actually now going through another rebuild phase. So I think that we just got to understand that there are different things that you do need to consider at these different stages of growth. So we actually also run a centralized services team that really runs as an almost like tries to run itself as, or it does run itself as with an entrepreneurial sort of startup mindset for all of our businesses to go, how do we go in and we add value to these businesses and think about it differently and to always sort of be running ahead of the curve. So I think if I sort of look at some areas where we've got startup or launch, we've still got this sort of, if we call it, this is phase 1, is startup or launch, it could even be you're doing startup or launch from an existing business into a new region or into a new suburb. So you're sort of taking the same thing. So you've got to go, all right, well, if I'm going to go into a new market, what's the market look like? Do understand all the key market metrics. What's the market share? How what service you're going to provide? What problems are you going to solve? So you're almost sort of going back to really thinking about that every time you go into a new region with a new agent or whatever.
And I guess there's probably options there too. Like sometimes you're taking an agent who's walking out of another business to start their business for the first time. Yeah. And other times you're doing a rebrand of an existing set of assets where you've been able to acquire a business where you think you can add substantial value to it. Yeah. And it's literally a bit of a startup, but it's a different conversation. And that must be a different level of effort for you about a brand new freshie versus something that you're rebranding.
Different speeds altogether. Mm-hmm. you know, and I think that you've got to realize that you've got different speeds in different markets. I mean, if you're one business, look, if you're listening to this today and you've got, you know, an office in one area and you're going through sort of sequential growth, I mean, that's a different conversation than if you're in multiple areas, right? So, so I might bounce in and out of some of that conversation, but hopefully it gives you some perspective. But yeah, I mean, you start off in this zone, to your point, of getting it all going, and then as you come out the other side of launch, you ideally want to be in growth, right? So growth you sort of launch, phase 2 is sort of growth. And this is where you want to sort of be getting some consistent and rapid results. You know, that you're growing your market share, your sales are going up, and you sort of feel as though you're scaling up, and the cash is flowing in. You know, and it sort of allows you to have this sort of sustainable trajectory, you know, if you want to think about it like that, right? So when you start getting into that sort of mode, you know, how long you pump that for comes down to money and time, right? Because, you know, often when you're pumping into growth, there's not a lot of cash coming out because it's often going back in, and you know, unfortunately, as you pump the cash back in, you pay tax on the money you haven't received. So at some point at which you want to start seeing some profit coming out, right? Because
that would be nice.
You've got to pay your tax.
Yeah.
Typically, once a business gets through some decent growth, it's a matter of going, well, you will at some point sort of, your growth rate will slow down, and you'll stabilize, right? And it's very easy for people to sort of get caught in that stabilization zone and stay there, you know. And in fact, I did a lot of work with Shawlaws years ago at business consulting, and they sort of talk about it as a bit of a black hole. You can actually go into a black hole, and depending upon where your business is at, what it's riding, will depend upon what you need to invest in next to get out of the black hole and go to the next level if you want to go back into growth again. So it's almost like you can sort of go into launch, you go into growth, you go into this sort of like black hole, if you want to call it that, and things just sort of consolidate. And then it's a matter of making some key decisions in that moment on what you do next, because that can either then lend itself to either more go back into launch and growth, or it goes more into maturity, right? So when you're in this zone of black hole, you often get, you know, you've got market saturation. You might be maintaining market share, but not growing a hell of a lot. And then you start focusing on things like, how do you optimize the efficiency? So you're thinking, okay, well, my growth, my revenue's at a particular level. Now, how will I actually optimize what I've got? How do I get better at it, do it smarter, be more efficient with it? You know, maybe how do I explore other revenue streams? How do I diversify? Because your main product's already up and running. So you know, you may also be going, like I said, how do I get into the next phase of growth? So that's sort of like stages 1, 2, and 3, and then you got 2 more typically that you'll cycle through, which is you know, you sort of you've already gotten through, you've mastered what you're doing, you've got some really good optimal efficiencies. They're all running really, really well, and then you sort of end up in this sort of maturity phase of your business where you know, you're at peak performance and you've got sort of maintaining your customer base and everything's going pretty well for you, right? You know, and you might even be thinking about, how do I expand into other markets? How do I take myself out of my existing region and go into another region? So this is when you've got a nice, mature business that everything's in order. It's got a good operating procedures, good systems, you know, all that stuff is all there, right? So, so, you know, you've done a lot of the hard work, you know, get yourself up out of the ground, grow, and so on and so on. So this is where you start thinking about, how do I create more value for my shareholders? How do I sort of think about what's happening next? Because if you don't, and you don't then bounce into the next phase of growth from maturity, or expand your markets, or do whatever, typically a business can maintain that for a period of time, but often the innovation stops going in the business and things, you know, because it's not, you're not chasing anything anymore. So you're not sort of thinking about, how can I be better? How can I improve? And people can get a little bit despondent in that maturity phase, a bit like, okay, well, what else? You know, if we're selling 1 in 3 properties in the area and this, that, whatever, people can actually get a little bit, you know,
jaded.
Yeah. And so you can easily then go into decline, which is sort of the last phase of business where you drop your sales, and there might be some changes happen. The competitors might get more aggressive. There might be some disruptions and all those sorts of things. But you know, and I've been in the business that's like that, and I know that, you know, you can even go into a bit of self-destruct mode because you think, Jesus, hold on, you spent all this time building a business, and then it's not sort of going the way you thought it was. So it's the time to say, well, the good news is you can shift. You know, you can pivot, you can renew and review that and set a new strategy. But typically they're the sort of 5 cycles that I see, stages of growth in a business that come and go, and you may have some parts of your business in launch and growth mode, and other parts of your business in maturity. It's just understanding that you can't apply the same strategy across the whole lot, because they have different needs in different areas.
So as you were talking, I was thinking about cash, people, strategy. It's like, okay, great. So what is the strategy we need at this point? What cash would we need at this point? And what people would we need at this point? And I was looking at brands, for example, there was one called Milk Run. It's quite popular at the moment, and Milk Run's like literally they spent $20 million developing it out of like Surrey Hills in Melbourne and Sydney, for quick grocery delivery in under like 20 minutes to your house. And all of a sudden Milk Run was burning so much cash they actually had to close down, so it went bankrupt. And then Woolworths came and bought it. And now Woolworths, rather than having Metro 60 where they delivered to your house, they actually have Milk Run. Now, I'm not traditionally a Woolworths person. I'd probably more go towards Coles, that I don't know, just always have. But now all of a sudden I really like Milk Run. And it's like it's a different brand. It's a bit edgier. It's a bit faster. It's a bit different. And like I want to go with that. And so that what they've done is that they've rebranded Metro 60 as Milk Run. So now all of a sudden I can actually press a button on an app and all of the groceries just turn up at my door in under 10 minutes.
Didn't they go broke?
Yeah, but but Woolworths went and bought the brand.
I see.
And so now they've used that branding strategy to completely redo all of their delivery. Now I've looked at Coles and Uber, two brands I respect in marketplace, but it feels a bit daggy and a bit old. But Milk Run, that feels energetic and driven. And all of a sudden, Woolworths have got this strategy how they've absolutely taken hold of the delivery market for those between 30 and 50 that naturally feel more edgier, more connected to that new brand as opposed to the old Woolworths brand. So it's about understanding that when you're at different stages, sometimes it's a brand issue, sometimes there's other things that you can be doing at a strategy level that allow you to go and hit it out of the park. And if you do that really well, absolutely changes the game.